So I haven't seen a structure yet for the Lenoir contract extension, which makes me a little hesitant to do a podcast about it. Because if you're a longtime listener of this pod or just a ball knower, you know that you just can't talk contract until you know the structure. But Chris, I want to run this by you because I had two thoughts when I saw this extension come down. It's a 5-year, $92 million extension, first reported by Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports. So I kind of wonder if what we're seeing is a shift in team building philosophy from the 49ers, where they're looking at the assets they have, and that includes Nick Bosa at defensive end, and they're looking at the success or lack thereof that they've had finding quality pass rushers since D Ford and DeForest Buckner left. And I'm kind of wondering if what we're seeing now is they go, hey, Renardo Green is on his rookie contract and playing great. You can get Deommodore Lenoir here for $18.4 million annually. Again, still waiting on the structure of that deal, but that's a really good foundation for a good secondary. We like Malik Mustafa. We like Jair Brown. Maybe this is a better way to go about investing in a defense where now they're going to build back to front, where instead of filling out their secondary with late round draft picks and cheap free agents, maybe they try and do that now on the defensive line with a better secondary.
Yeah, maybe. I think it was probably a little bit more simple than that when it came to Lenoir, though. I think it was just, this is a ascending player who we really like, who we don't want to let get to unrestricted free agency. And I think ultimately the Niners are going to have to make a choice, and maybe they've already made it, between signing Lenoir long-term and bringing back Charvarius Ward long-term. And I'm sure, if all things were being equal and they didn't have to pay, Brock Purdy whatever he's going to get, $50, $60, $65 million a year next year, they would bring back both. But I don't think they're going to be able to. And so I think their choice was to, to sign the younger guy, frankly. Like, I think Lenoir, only 4 years in the league. He's 25.
Just turned 25.
Just turned 25. Having a Pro Bowl type season, according to Pro Football Focus, he's 8th among all cornerbacks in passer rating when targeted. So he's having a really nice season. He's got a couple of interceptions, and I think they view him as a core player that, we've talked a lot about the 49ers having that core group moving forward. And I think they've clearly established that Lenoir is one of those guys. So I think it was as simple as not wanting a young ascending player to just leave the building. I don't know that they're changing their philosophy, because I think if you were to still ask John Lynch, like, all right, you could pay an elite pass rusher or you could pay an elite corner, I think he would choose pass rusher, just about all the time, every time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there isn't that pass rusher to pay on this roster aside from Bosa, right? Like, if Drake Jackson was having...
Well, Go ahead, sorry.
No, if Drake Jackson was having the equivalent career that Lenoir is having, I'm sure they would be dying to pay Drake Jackson.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is I think they're looking at what they have and they go, all right, Randy Gregory didn't work out. Chase Young didn't work out. Leonard Floyd's been meh. Yetur Gross-Matos has been hurt. The Drake Jackson thing didn't work out. They're not going to have a ton of money to invest in a defensive line. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be picking high enough in the draft to go get a Nick Bosa caliber player, at least presumably. So instead of trying to piece together this awesome defensive line that they've frankly not been able to do since 2019, like, Nick Bosa's been awesome. Eric Armstead had his moments. But beyond that, they've not really had a consistent pass rush since then. And that's kind of what I'm wondering. If it's like you said, if John Lynch, if they had the Deommodore Lenoir equivalent of a defensive end, they would obviously pay him, and that would continue to be their philosophy. But I think with the assets they have and are figured to have at their disposal moving forward, this is kind of the easier way to go. And if they pick 21st this year and you fall into an awesome defensive end, then super thumbs up. That's great. Or if you're one of your bargain free agents or a Sam Okuwanu type kind of breaks out and becomes a reliable player, that's awesome. But to me, this signaled like, yeah, hey, whatever money they might invest on the defensive line, they're just going to give to Deommodore Lenoir because they know he can play. And you know he's a good player. And Renardo Green's been a really good player. And that's how they're going to move forward through this kind of little window.
Yeah, I think you can look at it like that. I look at it like they've just always had sort of a veteran corner. Whether you go back to Richard Sherman, it was Sherman, and then they decided to pay Charvarius Ward the going rate in free agency, and now they're shifting that to Deommodore Lenoir. So I think it's that when you have good young ascending players and you think you can get them to sign for below the market rate, and I think that's probably an aspect of this too, is that the 49ers signed Lenoir to cheaper than they probably would have had he hit the open market in the spring. Like I think, another team is probably giving Lenoir $21 million a year, and the Niners got him, I think, 18.4 is at the math?
Yeah.
On average. And again, we haven't seen the structure, so we don't know exactly what it looks like.
Take everything we're saying with a grain of salt.
Yeah, just the obvious caveat that has to be mentioned. But I think he's the 12th highest paid cornerback in the league on average, and I feel like that's a fair contract for what he is right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
And we always see guys like him hit free agency and get far more than maybe they would be truly worth if you were just to do if you were to do a more clear-cut evaluation, because in free agency, and Trent Baalke used to talk about this, and I thought it was one of the smartest things I've heard Trent Baalke say.
Sure.
You always pay. There's always some sort of tax on unrestricted free agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always just pay a little bit more just because there is a bidding war. There's some ancillary factors that you have to pay for to get a marquee free agent to join your team. Niners don't really have to do that because Lenoir wanted to be here. He said in his press conference today, talking to reporters, he's a West Coast guy. He's comfortable with his teammates and the scheme and everything like that. So, yeah, instead of getting $20, $21, $22 million a year elsewhere, he decided to stay where he's comfortable, and it benefits the 49ers because they're not overpaying for him. I don't think. And so I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is if you can get a good player who fits what you want to do, who's at the prime of his career, at a relatively cheap contract compared to what he would make on the open market, I think you have to do it. I don't disagree with anything you're saying about, looking at the positions and everything. I just think it's as simple as not wanting to let a good young ascending player leave the building.
Sure, that makes sense. Cornerback contracts are so weird because it goes. Jalen Johnson makes $19 million annually on his contract, or that's the annual value of his contract. Then it drops to Carlton Davis at 14.8.
Right.
That's usually it's like increments of $1 million or so, but to go from 14 just to 19 or 14.8 to 19 is crazy. But I think that's honestly, this is the exact type of deal that I would have thought the 49ers tried to get Lenoir on in the offseason, where they get that done early. And the Dre Greenlaw opportunity wasn't going to be there because Lenoir didn't have the same kind of injury stuff that Dre Greenlaw was working through, where they got him at just bargain basement price. But I figured when the offseason passed and he hadn't signed a deal, that the ship had sailed. He was going to go get 20 plus and the 49ers weren't going to afford it. So I was very surprised to see this deal come in. Here's the other thing. And again, maybe I'm off base with this, but this is just kind of what I was thinking about. Does this mean that they have a really good grasp of what Brock Purdy's contract is going to look like? They obviously know because there's no quarterbacks are getting paid. There's no one from Purdy's draft class certainly that's due for a new deal. They know what Dak Prescott got. They know what Trevor Lawrence got. They know what Tua got. So they just kind of know, hey, it's going to be in this ballpark, and we can afford $18.4 million a year for Lenoir.
I would think so, because that's sort of how they operated in the past.
Hmm.
Back when I covered the team, every single time John Lynch spoke about a significant contract or a draft class or whatever, they would always talk about a 3-year plan. And everything they tried to do, they would factor into a 3-year plan. And obviously, if you sign Deommodore Lenoir to a 5-year extension, um, months before you're expected to give Brock Purdy a new contract, that's obviously part of a 3-year plan. So yeah, I think they have an idea. I think they have an idea too that they're probably not going to pay Charvarius Ward. Like, I think
Hmm.
that's the calculus to this, in my opinion. And I think they probably have an idea that they're not going to pay Talanoa Hufanga. And
Right.
so I think that, like, if you look at it just from a broad team building perspective, it's okay, we're not going to pay these players, and so we're going to earmark a certain amount for these guys that we are going to keep at premium positions, and Lenoir plays a premium position. So that's sort of how they approach it. I think I think you could probably operate a Deommodore Lenoir type contract under the assumption of, like, all right, we're going to pay Brock Purdy anywhere between, say, 46 and 62 million dollars a year, give or take, right? Like, depending on how negotiations go. And you probably have a similar buffer for like, you probably have some leeway when it comes to restructuring other contracts, right? Without
Hmm.
going through all the mechanics of that, the 49ers could probably clear up 10, 15, 20 million in cap space, if they need to, just by moving around base salaries to bonuses and all of that stuff too. So I
Hmm.
would imagine that they can probably make this all work with Brock Purdy. Like, there's no world where, like, signing Deommodore Lenoir is like, well, now we can't pay Brock. It's like,
Get
yeah,
get to the Austin, they're like, oh shoot,
we totally
we
forgot.
forgot. Brock, you are not going to believe this.
Right. We're really sorry, but yeah. So
Parag calls. Hey, John, Lenore didn't sign that contract yet, right? You're waiting for Brock to get it. Oh, oh no.
yeah. So
Brock, here's 28 a year. That's all we
yeah,
can give you.
I think the way the 49ers plan and handle their financial things, as difficult as they can be to negotiate with, evident by all the holdouts and the sketchy, not sketchy, but the protracted contract talks. Um, the 49ers, I think, are pretty good at making all this stuff work,
Hmm.
and probably deserve the benefit of the doubt. That's not to say that negotiation with Brock Purdy is going to be easy, but I think they do well at planning, when it comes to making all the contracts fit long term.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's part of why the Ayuk thing got out of hand, is because they had planned for a certain market, and then the market dictated that everybody was going to make 30 instead of 27 or whatever they were kind of
Right.
planning for.
Right.
Um, I'd be interested to see if the Purdy deal gets done early, because they do know, like, it's not like they're waiting on a market. They know exactly what it's going to look like, and they can do he's extension eligible when the clock hits zeros in week 18, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They
Like,
could sign into a deal before the playoffs start.
I would be shocked if if they do the training camp thing. Not shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't do it that way. Not
Right.
the way I would
I
go
think
about it.
I think the lesson for them is to get it done as soon as possible. Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's ultimately the lesson. The 49ers currently have $54 million in cap space, which basically, like, they'll roll all of that over into next year, which will give them 54 million in cap space.
Mm-hmm.
So they're basically, like, everything they're rolling over is their cap space. So and that, I think that number on over the cap does not account for Deommodore Lenoir's contract. But the way
It does not
the
yet.
Niners, yeah, the way the Niners typically do their contracts, if you guys know, they're usually backloaded to where it's probably like a 2 or 3 year contract in reality, with the practical guarantees and stuff. It's most times these guys do not play out their full lengths of their contracts. So either the contracts will end early, or they'll restructure / re-sign, and maybe in 2 or 3 years, Lenoir signs a new 3-year extension that makes it a little bit more palatable from a cap perspective. Anyway, that's all stuff we can talk about later on. But the point here, $54 million in cap space going into next year. That's a pretty healthy amount, even before you start making cuts and maybe getting rid of some of your high-priced veterans, right? Like your Javon Hargraves potentially, guys like that. Do you? And that also doesn't account for the pending free agents you have. That doesn't account for Dre Greenlaw and Charvarius Ward and Talanoa Hufanga and some other of the free agents that they'll have. So they also got to figure out a Deebo Samuel situation, right? Like, do you do a Deebo Samuel contract? Do you trade Deebo in the offseason? Then that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, so they have $54 million in cap space projected for 2025 before Lenoir's contracts hit the books, which is a healthy amount of space. But they have a lot of really interesting free agency decisions to make with their own guys, and this Lenoir one was really kind of the first.
Yeah, no doubt. Shocked that he did a deal less than 20, to be totally honest. But
yeah, so I mean, looking at it,
good for him and good for the 49ers, man. He's been, outside of Fred Warner, he's been their best defender this year, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you feel about Bosa.
Sure.
There's still some pressure numbers that say Bosa's still having a really great year, but
I've never watched Deommodore Lenoir grab a quarterback by the arm and stand there. So
fair.
Here, let's this is just for the YouTube audience here. I'm going to pull up this video. We're going to talk run fits.
So real quick, Niners free agents.
We're not actually doing that. That's not a thing that happened. Go on. Sorry.
Niners free agents. I think Deebo counts because he's, the way his contract's set up, it's kind of, they have an out after this year, so I think he counts towards their free agency. But they're unsigned free agents. Charvarius Ward, Dre Greenlaw, Devondre Campbell, Aaron Banks, Josh Dobbs, John Feliciano, Kevin Givens.
The Aaron Banks one's kind of interesting.
Yeah, Talanoa Hufanga, Jordan Mason. What?
Aaron Banks one's kind of interesting. Yeah, moving on.
I was just reading the list. No, the Aaron Banks one is interesting because they typically don't pay guards, and
right.
But they could. It actually wouldn't be surprising to me if they before the season's over re-signed Aaron Banks to a team friendly-ish contract. I could see that.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
But man, I haven't thought about guard contracts if we're being
buckle up,
fully transparent here. What do we got? Man, okay, maybe not. Landon Dickerson's making $21 million a year. Quentin Nelson $20 million a year.
But Aaron Banks isn't that good. Aaron Banks is not that level of player.
I know. He's probably John Runyon Jr. with the Giants is making $10 million a year, and he looks like a top 10 average per year. So yeah, if Aaron Banks, 3 years, $30 million, if that pops up before the season's over, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Especially since right tackle may become a problem that they feel the need to address via the draft. Center may become a problem they feel the need to address via the draft, depending on how they feel about Drake Nugent on the practice squad. Is he still on the practice squad?
I have a take.
Oh, please.
Put Dom Pooney at right tackle.
Come on. Right? Come on. I'm with it.
So good at right guard. Are you just like, that's his spot? I think he could play right tackle. He played tackle at a pretty high level in college.
Yeah, maybe. I would love to, if they're anti that idea, That's one of those things that I would love to have, like, get to sit down and find out why. Like, what are all the things that Colton McKivitz does better than Dominic Pooney at right tackle?
Yeah. I do think Chris Forrester would give a good answer on that if that was the case. Like, if the Niners decided to not use McKivitz is under contract, right?
Yeah, they've like extended him.
Weird.
Well, they extended him for 2 years in 23. I think.
Let's see what the
and did they restructure his deal or something?
The bona fide dirt dog. Let's see what his contract looks like.
Because his agency tweeted out that he got some like 70% guarantee or something like that.
He's signed through 25, so through next year.
Great. So he can be a swing tackle next year. That'd be great. Have that $4.6
million cap hit. I mean, starting tackle making $4.6 million. I guess you can't expect like an all pro to be on that type of deal, but
yeah,
still.
Yeah. George Kittle not practicing on Wednesday, but Kyle Shanahan. I think it's the first time I've ever heard Kyle Shanahan say this guy has a hamstring injury. He's not practicing Wednesday, but he'll be fine. Like, usually when a guy doesn't practice Wednesday, he gives the yeah, we'll see later in the week. Hope we can go Sunday, but we'll have to see how he responds. And with Kittle, he was like, nah. I thought that was kind of weird. Not in like any kind of bad way. It was just very different. Not the answer I was expecting.
Yeah, he said he indicated that he was optimistic Kittle would play.
Yeah.
I think Kittle's at the point in his career where he just isn't going to practice on Wednesdays ever.
There's no reason
I don't know why I would.
Did you know all 7 of his touchdowns have been in the red zone this year?
I didn't, but that tracks. It hasn't been like 2018 when he's scoring every touchdowns from 60 yards.
I was looking at this earlier. From 2017 to 2021, he scored 11 red zone touchdowns. And since 2022, so the last 2+ season, he scored 15.
Yeah, I mean,
that's crazy.
When he broke the tight end receiving record in 2018, It was a lot of like he's wide open in space and had a ton of yards after the catch. And it was like that year, it was his second season. That year was like, is Kittle ever going to be like a contested catch guy? And now he's like the equivalent of how good he was yards after the catch. Like he's that good at being a contested catch guy now.
Yeah. He just completely shifted the type of player he is and is having a second prime. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Shout out to George Kittle, man. What a player. Friend of the pod.
All-pro season? All-pro Kittle?
Yeah. Barring, knock on wood, an injury or some kind of absence, I don't know how he's not.
Doesn't he? I think he leads tight ends in touchdowns, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's just way up there in touchdowns in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's what a player, man.
Good little player.
I think that's and then Nick Bosa may or may not play on Sunday. We'll monitor that throughout the week.
I'd imagine he plays.
He said on Sunday he played through the most pain he's ever played through in his life.
That's what he said?
Something like that. Something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Maybe that's why he just decided to hold Baker's arm instead of tackle him or do something else.
Tackle him or do literally anything. Let him go next time. I don't know. All right.
Any thoughts on the game? I know we're not going to preview the game until later in the week, but any early thoughts on Niners Seahawks?
Gotta win. They have to go. They have to win all of their division games moving forward. They're going to lose a couple down the stretch. I think you lose to Buffalo. You lose an AFC game, fine. But with the way the NFC is shaping up and the NFC West are shaping up, you're going to need all the possible tiebreakers. So sweeping Seattle in the division would be a big deal. Beating Green Bay would be a pretty big deal. So they're at the point. Go ahead.
You have to beat Seattle because you can't count on winning both Green Bay and Buffalo games.
Yeah, if you lose to Seattle, you have to win out.
Right. So if you lose to Seattle, like my whole thing is you got to win 2 of the next 3. Right. Think you have to win 2 of the next 3.
Yeah.
You have Seattle, you have Buffalo, and Green Bay. I forget the order. Is it Green Bay and then Buffalo?
Yes.
So if you lose to Seattle, I find it hard to believe that you're going to win both of those games.
Yep.
At Green Bay and at Buffalo. So beat Seattle, improve your division record, and then you could better handle, be in a better spot to lose one of those next 2.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Not that you're like planning to lose games, but you know what I mean. Like you
feel
a lot better about going into the next 2 games if you beat Seattle than if you were to lose to Seattle.
Yeah, and I know I've harped a lot on gotta look dominant and this and that and score in the red zone and special teams mistakes, and just you gotta win that one. And that's kind of just how, like you said, you brought this up on the post-game pod, and I thought it was a good point. Like, this clearly isn't last year's team that's just going to all of a sudden start beating the brakes off teams. So you just got to do enough to win these games. I don't necessarily need style points to be convinced.
You're coming off a long trip. Seattle's coming off a bye. The Niners on paper should beat the brakes off the Seahawks, but I just think it'll be a close game because some weird shit will happen. Someone will get hurt early on in the game. Like that. The Niners every single game has felt a little bit weird in some sense this year for the Niners. So I wouldn't expect the Seahawks of all teams to present a normal game.
Of course. Why would they?
So
all right.
Anyway.
We'll preview the pod, or we'll preview the pod. We will preview the game tomorrow. If you're listening to this Thursday, Friday game preview comes out.
We could preview the pod. Be like, yeah, Chris is going to be in his office.
What do you think?
Kyle's going to be wearing a hat and some glasses.
I would like. Okay, Kyle's fine at home. I need to see him perform from the radio studio. Like, can you do that once?
Right. Can we get you in a car setup to prove that you can do it somewhere outside of your comfort zone?
Can you do it with a stick mic to show that you don't need a mic arm to be successful?
Right. What's it like when you don't have that Ethernet internet connection? Can you still make it work?
Can you do it in 5G? Cowherd does it in 5G. Can you do it in 5G? Anyways.
Yeah.
All right.
We're just system podcasters. That's really what this is.
That's it. All right. That's it for us. Salute to Kevin Jones, the godfather of Blue Wire, for starting this podcast. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your pods. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're already watching this on YouTube. Appreciate you. Can you hit the little thumbs up there at the bottom of the video? We'd appreciate that. And also subscribe to the channel while you're here. If you don't, if you do subscribe, send this to your 49ers group chat and tell all your friends to subscribe on YouTube as well. We would appreciate the heck out of it.
Yeah, and shout out to our guy Sam at Sac State. Ran into him today at an event. Avid listener of the pod.
Sam.
So shout out to Sam. Appreciate you.
The homie.
All right. Talk to you guys later in the week. See ya.